Okay. Hi, this is Speculative Two Cents. I'm Desi D. I am now with my guest Anita Stewart. She's a great author. I hope you'll check out her books. And we are here to talk about dark speculative fiction. And I will let Anita really introduce who she is.
Okay, so I am Anita Stewart. I write under A.S. Stewart, and kind of dark speculative th fiction is my thing because I write horror and I write dark fantasy, and even the poetry I write tends to be a little dark. I'm currently writing a thing a little bit lighter on the spectrum because I'm writing a cozy mystery. But I am going back to the dark fiction with my next book, which is a horror novella, or horror novel. I'm not sure whether it'll be how long it'll be yet.
Ah, so you're coming back to the dark side.
Well, I never left. I think, like I said, my muse got drunk one day and decided I must write cozy paranormal mystery. So,
Okay. Drunk muses are always very interesting.
yeah, and you don't argue with her because she's also homicidal. So,
Yeah, mine's typically is too, but mine's is more like a dark cloud that just likes to shoot lightning ideas at me. Yeah, he gets a little grumpy too. So how would you define dark speculative fiction?
well, like speculative fiction is fantasy, sci-fi, horror, something along those lines. And especially with the horror stories, I mean, that's kind of just dark from the get-go. And with the fantasy, you've got dark fantasy, you've got grim dark, which is something I don't haven't written yet. I have toyed with the idea, but no, I haven't written that yet. But like grim dark is where pretty much everything's horrible. And there is no good guys. They're all just kind of shades of gray over in Grimdark. Anyway, horror you do have some good guys, and of course you've got your villains and your. But I mean that's kind of what it's always it's to me dark speculative fiction is exploring the darker side of human nature. It's like the killers and the monsters and the darker things that we generally don't like to think about. Unless, of course, we're reading about them because it's a safe place. Like I know a lot of horror authors I know say that to them horror is like a safe place to explore the darker sides of your fears and your anxieties.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Because I like to joke around and say I save all my darkness for my fiction, just so I can play around with it there. Because I don't want it in the real world, because the real world gets a little too depressing. And I think the second part I love about dark fiction is it gives you that outlet to try to pretend that it's all fiction. Just for even if it's just for a little bit, you get to pretend none of these terrible things really happen, even though they do.
Yeah, I watch a lot of true crime, so I don't have that luxury because it's like, oh yeah, it's all fiction. Then I go watch TV. Oh yeah, no, not it's not actually
Oh yeah,
fiction,
no.
is it?
I'll
That's
accidentally hit the news every so often and realize, no, not fiction.
Yeah, that's where I get a lot of my ideas though, is the true crime stuff because I'm a big fan of it, especially the historical true crime because I love a lot of my dark fiction is historical because I love historical stuff. I'm a big history nerd, so
So then I have to ask, have you done a Jack Ripper yet?
actually that's how I started writing horror. Because up to then I've been just writing fantasy, but I mean the historical stuff's in with the fantasy too, because you always base it on something historical, mostly anyway, if you're writing epic fantasy or high fantasy. So, but I wrote this nice, sweet little story for this online contest thing. It wasn't like for prizes or anything, it was just part of a group I had been involved with at the time. And I wrote it, and apparently my muse is allergic to nice
Ah.
because she refused to give me any ideas until I wrote a horror story. So, as a Jack the Ripper fan, well, I wouldn't say fan because I mean, you're never a fan of a serial killer, but of a buff of Jack the Ripper. I decided, well, I'll write a Jack the Ripper story and I'll make it a prequel story, kind of how Jack the Ripper came to be.
Hmm.
So that's the first real horror story I had written. Like before then, I'd written kind of like dark fantasy, kind of like fantasy with horror elements. But that was the first like dark serial killer horror story that I wrote, and it's actually in the first Killers and Demons book that I put out.
Oh, that sounds interesting, and it sounds like your muse and my muse would get along. My muse doesn't seem to like nice too much either. I remember one time I tried to make a character's backstory less terrible, and I amazed myself. I made it way worse. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, it's like I said, I've never met a character that I've refused to kill. So
I don't know. I don't kill characters as often. I think I'm more into torturing them. And once you
yeah,
kill them, they're like free of that. So I'm less likely to kill them. I'm not saying I won't kill them, just less likely because you can do so much more worse things to them than kill them.
yeah, I've done a few worse things and then killed them. I mean, the option's always there.
Yeah, always there. Hmm. Yeah. I find it fascinating too because I've realized with like most of my characters, I like to write about killers. And I don't know. There's just something about a character capable of doing that and still maybe being able to be a good person at the same time. That kind of fascinates me.
Yeah, I've done a few of those. I've done a couple of the straight up, like, there's no redeeming quality
Hmm.
killers too. Because, I mean, they do exist. I mean, I don't think you really want to use them a lot because, and like, I've never used them in a longer work. They're most like in short fiction. Because, I mean, you can pretty much get away with the killer without a redeeming quality in short fiction without making him like a cliche or a two-dimensional character or her.
Yeah.
I've
Sorry, my
done female.
necklace wants to curl up here.
Yeah, I've done female killers too. So I've done a couple of those, like the really awful, awful serial killer types.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, most of mine have some sort of interesting, at least, qualities. I'm not sure redeeming, but like two of my favorite killers I've written are Jane and Millicent, which
Hmm.
basically takes like sort of like the serial killer and melds it with Jane Austen.
Oh, okay.
So it's sort of like Regency era manners and sweetness, but they're serial killers. And I really like them. And actually, if you go to my website on the splash page and the front page, you will see something that says don't drink the tea. And that is that's directly because of the Jane and Millicent story, because they use Jane's special blend of tea is not something you want to drink.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that doesn't sound very pleasant. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know, the dark characters. It's interesting because I think also in a weird way, they also feel a little empowering in a sense to read about them, especially if they're not all evil. Because there's times where we wish we could do something like that. We don't want to. We know it's inherently wrong and we should never ever do it. But there's something about reading about a character that does do it and
Yeah,
just how that reacts and how that changes them.
yeah, definitely. I think that there is a reason why the revenge arc is so popular in books and movies because, I think we all kind of deep down would like to get a little revenge against certain people.
Hmm.
In our lives. I mean, not necessarily some of the dark, horrible types of revenge I've written about, but it's always,
Hmm.
I think that's why readers respond to that sort of story because it's a bit like it's very cathartic to read it. It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It's like, ooh, wouldn't that be nice?
Yep,
I
you
mean,
get to go.
you're never actually going to do it in real life, but to read
Mhm.
about someone else doing it, it helps get rid of that emotion.
Yeah, it helps us release it because we're like, in some ways, we feel like we did, even though we didn't do it. And then we don't have to. we're less likely to ever do it in real life. I won't say we won't. There's still people out there doing things, horrible things. Maybe
Mm.
it's because they don't read enough fiction.
Yeah, that's true. Or write it, because horror writers, all the horror writers I know are the sweetest people I've ever met.
Hmm. They are very nice.
Yeah,
I think they have the same philosophy as me. They just save all their evil for the fiction and throw it
yep.
out there. Mhm. So, you said Jack the Ripper is kind of what got you into writing the darker stuff, right?
Well, horror. I mean,
Yeah, horror.
I had written a few darker fantasies before that, but the dark horror stuff.
Hmm. So, what got you into the darker fantasies?
Well, I've always liked fantasy, and I actually first started out trying to write mysteries because that's what I read growing up was mysteries, which is probably why I tend to the darker
Yeah.
fiction in the first place. Because I had a childhood of Agatha Christie, P.D. James, all those British women who wrote those nice cozy fantasies that really weren't all that cozy if you read them.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I grew up on, and I read Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine too, and that's why I love short stories. Well, partly why I love short stories so much. But when I started writing the mysteries, I kept, it's like it's harder to write a mystery than you think, first of all, because I mean you do have to craft out the plot, but it's also I always tended to sort of veer over to the fantasy
Hmm.
side of it while I was writing the mystery. So I thought, well, I'll keep going there. I may as well just go write fantasy in the first place because I love fantasy and I also read fantasy as well in my later teens. So that's what, and I started with King Arthur, Arthurian stories, because well, that was always a interest of mine, the King Arthur legends. So I started with some of those, and I wrote a few other stories, and I put them in a collection, and self-published that collection. You can't really get that collection anymore. It's still technically up on Lulu.com, but that's about the only place you get it these days. Because when you start out and you do your first book, you don't know what you're doing at all. So
Yeah.
anyway, but it was a good exercise in the self-publishing world, and it was a good exercise in figuring out what I wanted to write in the stories. Anyway, but my next book was Chronicles of the Undead, which is still actually people still enjoy reading that one. And that one was kind of an exercise less in dark fiction, but also in different formatting because it's an epistolary book written in diary format. And that one came out of the thought, what if the new neighbors that just moved in were vampires?
Oh.
And then I thought, well, what if the setting was Georgian England? So basically that's what Chronicles of the Undead is. It's a bunch of diary entries written by people living in the 1800s, late 1700s to the 1800s. It's three generations of people and what happened with their encounters with these vampires. So that was kind of like the first dark fiction that I wrote. Because I mean, I don't really subscribe to the romantic vampire or the sparkly vampire. I mean, they're fine. And I might actually read those books if I find a good one, but that's not really what I like writing about when I write with vampires. I like the dark vampires, the original vampires, and I did actually a lot of research into the original legends, like the Eastern European legends and even some of the Indian lore of kind of vampiric creatures, because vampiric creatures are quite diverse across a lot of cultures. I mean, they're not the same as what we think is the modern vampire, but they still have the same characteristics, like they hunt at night, they suck blood, they're the undead usually, things like that. So I got some interesting folklore and I wove that into the book as well. So
Okay. It sounds like it was a fun thing and a lot of research.
yeah, it's not something I do again though, because Writing diary entries is very difficult, I found.
Mhm. You know, it
You know,
sounds like fun.
yeah, it was kind of an interesting exercise to write, but it's like it's like making them any more than shorter snippet lengths was a lot was difficult. And what was really interesting was checking the dates because I did it this historical book. But luckily I found an online calendar from the years that I was using, and I could actually check the dates to make sure like I wasn't doing something on a Sunday that they wouldn't do on a Sunday and things like that.
Okay, yeah. That's the challenge with doing anything historical is trying to get as accurate as possible and actually understanding the culture of the time.
Yeah, that was the fun part of that book though, because I went a deep dive into coffee houses of the Georgian era.
Ooh.
Yeah, which was that they're not like the coffee shops today. I mean, people went there and they drank coffee and they gathered there, but it was far more of a political atmosphere and a business atmosphere in those places too, which was fascinating research on that.
Hmm.
Of course, it only ended up like two scenes in the book.
Oh yeah. Like the majority of our research, very little of it ends up in the book.
Mm.
But it is always fascinating to learn. That's why they say you never know what a writer will know. Because we do the research on the weirdest things.
Yeah, I was researching cyanide the other day.
Oh, that sounds like a fun topic.
Yeah, I was trying to, I wanted to see what the symptoms were if you died from cyanide because I wanted because she has to see the dead body, and I was just kind of wondering what the dead body would look like, if there
Hmm.
was anything like that. So that was fun. I got a lot of suicide prevention websites in that search.
Yeah, I am
It's
sure.
like, yeah, don't worry, Google. This is just writing research.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder what they think after a while, after I research some stuff, the weird things they get. I'm
Yeah,
like, if there is a watch list, it's only a matter of time before I end up on it.
yeah. I mean, one day I did YouTube research for Victorian era rifles and demonology
Ooh.
for the same story.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, demonology is a really interesting thing. I've looked at it a little bit for some of my stories. I haven't written them. Like I said, my muse is a little mean. It likes to throw lightning bolts, but it doesn't like to give me the time to finish the idea before it wants to hit me with a new one. So I got like several projects going at one time instead of, just one at a time.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I said, I think I got like a dozen projects, active projects on the go at the moment. And then there's a lot of unactive projects that have been put on the back burner too for various reasons. But yeah, so it's like, yeah, I'm always working on something.
Yes. And all my back burner ones keep trying to haunt me. They're like, aren't you going to move me up? Like, I can only write so many. So many to focus on at a time. And also makes publishing very slow when you do that. So do you have
Yeah.
like a specific um character that's your favorite that's a dark character from any?
I I kind of like Balthazar. He's only appeared in a couple of stories like he's the main I don't want to say he's the main character, but he's kind of the tie-in character with the Killers and Demons books. And so there's only been two of them. And I wrote a little flash fiction about him too, but I kind of like him because he's fun to write. He's he's basically a demon is what he is, but he's sort of like Hell's bounty hunter.
Okay.
So he goes after souls that have escaped hell. Like there are ways to get out of hell if you are a soul, and if someone escapes hell, he hunts you down and brings you back. So, like I said, I've only written two stories about him for the Killers and Demons book. There's another one that I'm going to write when I ever get around to finishing book three of that series. And I wrote a flash fiction, and I do want to write a novella about him too, about his days as a pirate.
Ooh. Okay, that sounds like a lot of fun and a
Yeah,
lot.
but See, I like Balthasar because I can play with him because he is a demon, right?
Hmm.
He's got no human emotions, right?
Hmm.
So there's no empathy, there's no mercy, there's he's just gonna kill you. If he finds you, he's either gonna kill you or he's gonna send you back to hell. One of the two. But the thing with him is he's got certain characteristics that are fun to play with because he's very vain, right?
Hmm.
So he always is very meticulous about his appearance, and if his appearance gets all mussed up, he gets very annoyed. And he likes he doesn't like humans. He hates humans, but he likes being on Earth because, well, first of all, it's better than hell
Hmm.
because, well, hell's not a nice place. But it also has a lot of luxuries. Like he likes fine wine, he likes fine food, he likes the finer things that the humans make, just doesn't like the human beings that make them. So
Yeah, so he has a bit of a problem. He wants to get
yeah.
rid of the people, but he wants to keep the things they keep making.
Well, yeah, it's not so much that he wants to get rid of the people. He just doesn't want to associate with the people, right? It's like just give me the stuff and go away, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of his attitude.
Oh, okay.
So when
Yeah,
he does actually have to go out and interact with people, it's kind of fun to write that because
oh yeah, because I'm gonna assume he's extremely uncomfortable with the situation. And
yeah, extremely irritated would be a better word than
hmm.
uncomfortable. It's like, get out of my way, human, or I'm going to flash
Yeah.
fry you with demon fire. It's like,
Hmm. Yeah, the whole trying to restrain yourself from having to kill the person just because they said hi.
yeah, basically. Sometimes he doesn't. So,
Really depending on his mood.
mm,
Yeah, he sounds like he'd be a very fun character. Do
yeah.
you ever do like the anti-hero types? Ones who are, the morally gray good person in your story.
Yeah, I think my Cristiano de Ravina, I haven't published it yet, but it's the Obsidian Blade series that I'm working on. And that one's kind of a dark fantasy set in 15th century Venice. And he's a morally great character. Like he's a good person, right? But he's also an immortal. He got cursed by a witch, so he's an immortal. So he's seen some things in his past. He's done some things that are not so good because he was
Hmm.
a soldier and he's worked for various city states in the Italian, well, what was Italy? It technically wasn't Italy in 15th century. It was a bunch of Italian city states. So he's worked for various and he's killed people and he's currently working for Venice and he's sort of like a fixer and an assassin. But he also cares about people and he cares about the city of Venice and he wants to so he's the city's protector, right? He's
Hmm.
just he's a bit ruthless when it comes to the protecting part. So he is a bit morally gray on that. So that one's a fun character to play with too.
Yeah, that's kind of like the characters I like to write. They're very morally gray, but I like to also include a lot of like traumas. I don't know. I explore a lot of that into my stories. They're not safe places for people. They're
Yeah.
really not.
Yeah, Cristiano definitely has a lot of traumas. Being immortal is not fun.
Yeah, that sounds more like one of the worst curses,
Mm.
especially if you're the only one who's still immortal.
Yeah, and the church is not fond of him either because of being cursed and being immortal. They they view it as his soul cannot go to God. So he's not exactly a person that they want to associate, but then again, they also kind of have to associate with them because he deals with all the paranormal stuff, right?
Hmm.
And while the church doesn't acknowledge the paranormal stuff is real, they know the paranormal stuff is real.
Hmm.
So it's like he's sort of like the necessary evil for the church.
Oh, okay.
So when they do have to deal with him in his role as the paranormal hunter assassin guy for the city of Venice, they do so, but they do so reluctantly. Although I've also got a couple of people, few church, because that's the main church stance on him. And then the other stance with the church, I've got a priest and a nun. And that was interesting research, I tell you. The Venetian nuns,
Hmm.
they're not what you think they are at all. So, the Venetian, at least in the time period, the they kind of cracked down on the nunneries in Venice as the centuries wore on, but in the time period I'm using, the nunneries were pretty much a very political entity and controlled quite a bit in the city of Venice, which
Okay.
was very interesting. So I've got a feisty little nun working on the side of good, helping him out when things go bad. So,
Well, they sound like the nuns I would like back then, very
mm.
strong, independent people. Hmm. All right. I did have a question and now it's leaving my brain. So that kind of sucks. I hate when that happens. I get them and then they go away. Oh yeah, now I remember. So when we're doing like with dark speculative fiction and everything's pretty dark, how do you like to handle the stakes?
Well, I like the personal stakes is kind of the way I go because it's like, I mean, you've got like with the epic fantasy, like with my Saga of the Outer Islands, so you had the big world ending stakes, right? But you also had the personal stakes. Like when the in the first book, the personal stake is the relationship between my main character, Rafe, and his sister, the goddess of the moon, who's basically, well, she's, let's say she has some emotional issues and she's not handling them well.
Hmm.
Anyway, so, and she's kind of teamed up with the Nightmare Crow, who's the main series villain. And he's got an agenda and he kind of manipulates and plays on her problems with her brother. So that's the personal stake in it is like, is he going to have to kill her, right?
Hmm.
Is he going to have to kill his own sister in order to save the world? So that was the personal stake that I've played with that one. And I kind of liked how I ended that one because it's not a bad ending. It's not a dark ending. I mean, yeah, sure, lots of people died, but they had a happy ever after,
Yeah,
sort of.
relatively speaking, it wasn't as dark as it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's also a very interesting character to write, Manu May, who's my goddess of the moon, because she's basically lost, well, she hasn't lost touch with reality. She's just kind of shifted the plane of it for herself. And so and so with her, you never know what's going to say. Sometimes she's very direct, sometimes she's speaking in rhymes, sometimes she's just whatever. Sometimes she just kills you. So,
Yeah, she sounds fun. I like the chaotic characters personally. The ones that
yeah,
are a little harder to predict. I have
yeah,
a couple of them in different stories of mine, and they just make things so interesting because they bring a level of chaos to a very ordered situation, and that's always fun.
yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, because like with the third book in that particular series too, I introduced Rafe's mother, who is basically the goddess of death. And
Mm.
it's like, yeah, yeah, this is why he has such a dysfunctional childhood. I'm just saying. You learn why he's so his family's so dysfunctional as the series goes on. So yeah, she's the goddess of death, and basically she has no concept of anything but what she is, because she's less of a person and more of a force of nature. Is like, yes, I'm here. I have. She loves her kids, though. I mean, she's a mother and she loves her kids. Just her form of love may not be the regular thing that most people think of when they think of motherly love. It's like Rafe was telling his first mate a story in the third book about how he gave his mother a bone for her birthday, and she loved it. That was her favorite present. It's like, I have a bone. And it's probably in her throne, in her kingdom, too. So,
I can't blame her. Sometimes it's really cool to find bones. I remember looking for them as a kid in the mountains, just looking to see where I could find a leftover jawbone or something that was just lit out there. I
Yeah,
clearly did
but
not stay on the path if I was looking for that.
yeah. Yeah, you definitely don't want to cross death though, because she's not beatable.
Oh.
I mean, she's not, didn't use her a lot because she is such a cr- powerful creature. And I mean, she's got flaws and she's got weaknesses, right? Because I mean, she has fallen in love and that kind of clouds her vision of certain situations because her first love and her had a bad breakup, basically. But and it sort of clouds her worldview on certain things in the current situation they're going through. So I mean, she does have dimensions to the character, but as far as being, she is like she's death, basically. If you come across her and she decides, well, you're not going to live anymore, you're not going to live anymore.
Yeah. The only one who stands a chance is the character you have that's immortal.
Now that would be interesting because I mean, she and both her and Rafe have power over souls.
Hmm.
So I don't know if she could actually take Cristiano's soul or not. That would be interesting because I mean, technically, his soul is bound to his immortality, I would assume. I
Yeah.
th Yeah, that might be an extra thing to write for the newsletter one day.
Yeah. What would happen if these two met? Hmm.
They'd probably be friends.
Probably. But yeah, there's no point in us fighting. Let's just buddy up.
I mean,
Let's just.
because I mean, she's not an evil thing. That's what I like about the character. She's not evil per se. She just is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the concept in itself is not evil. It just is. It's just not also. It's also not pleasant.
Oh, definitely not pleasant. As the villain from book three found out. She's definitely not pleasant.
That sounds fun. I'm gonna have to read it and find out what happened.
Yeah. Oh, he was another fun villain to write Black Axe Morgan because he's a pirate. He's basically a zombie pirate, is what he is in book three.
I like that, and he reminds me of One Piece because well, they have a Axe Hand Morgan in that one too. He was not that cool though. He was interesting, but not cool. He was easily
Yeah.
defeated.
I don't know why I named him Black Axe Morgan, but name just popped in my head because like he wasn't really supposed to be the villain in book three because it was just like a one-off comment story to fill in some backstory. One-off comment that one of the sailors did to Rafe to fill in a little backstory about him using his power. Anyway, but when I went to write book three, I knew I wanted pirates, right? Because I mean, you can't have a nautical series and not have pirates in it sometime.
Yeah, you gotta have them.
So I wanted pirates, and so I remembered that, you know, Black Axe Morgan was mentioned and he was a pirate, and I knew he was kind of dead.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, we'll bring him back as a kind of a zombie pirate, and so I made this whole zombie pirate crew, and because it works within the magic system that I'd set up in the book, so that was fun.
Oh yeah, I love when that happens. A lot of like my character names, they just come to me with the character. So other ones I have to spend more time trying to research what name would actually fit what I want the character to be and how
Yeah,
can I play with that.
yeah, and sometimes the research it just clicks. I wrote a short story for an anthology, and I called it um, Forsaken. That was
Mhm.
the And when I was looking up a name for the character, I can't remember what the name is now because it flipped just gone out of my head. But the meaning of the name was one of the meanings of the name was forsaken.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
thought, oh yeah, I gotta use that name. So
I love that. And I like the titles of your books. They sound so cryptic. Because now you got to find out why are the people forsaken, or why is the character forsaken?
Yeah, that was a that was that was a dark story. Yeah, pretty much the everyone was bad in that story. Half the cast died, and I left it open-ended, but yeah, the world's gonna end, people.
Ah, that reminds me of the book. What was it? The Last Good Policeman. I think that was the concept of it. And asteroids, or the Last Policeman, I think. Asteroids coming to destroy the Earth, and society's crumbling, but he still wants to do his job. It was an interesting book, but you know it's not going to have a happy ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's 3 books in this series before it was over. Mm. So when you're writing your mysteries, do you usually start knowing the mystery or do you have to figure out the mystery?
Well, with the current paranormal cozy mystery that I'm finishing up for this year, um, the ending I had thought was going to happen didn't happen. In fact, one of the other characters piped up and said, "No, I'm the killer. People, pick me." And I'm going, okay, yeah, that makes a better ending. We'll pick him.
That sounds
But
fun.
yeah, um, but like with the like I write some paranormal steampunk horror mysteries as well, and they're more of a humorous sort of short stories. Like it's a short story series, and the endings don't necessarily come to me because I'm kind of just writing the short story, pantsing the short story there. So it sort of evolves a lot of times with the endings on those ones. But yeah, they're a lot of fun to write because Elspeth is she's a proper Victorian lady who likes dynamite and guns.
Well, who wouldn't,
Yeah.
really? So I take it it's very dark humor that you put in.
Yeah, it's kind of darkish humor. That's kind of humor I like. I mean, it's more of a that particular series, it's more of a Sherlock Holmes parody, and there's actually a running gag of her hating Sherlock Holmes that goes through the series and will actually culminate in Reichenbach.
Mm.
And with the fifth story, I have to finish writing the fifth story, and but hopefully that will be out this year as well. But yeah, so yeah, they're going to Reichenbach for the last story. But
Uh,
yeah, Elspeth's fun though, because I mean, it's like you can do crazy things with her, and I mean, the like I balanced her with Lars, who's basically got blackmailed into being her partner by her father. So he's sort of like her babysitter in a way, but he kind of likes the paranormal investigation too, although he really won't admit it because he's also a bit of a coward.
oh, okay.
So it's like he likes the paranormal investigation, but kind of at a distance where his life is not in danger.
Ooh, yeah, I can kind of see the logic behind that.
But he has to keep Elspeth from getting herself killed. So yeah, so that's the kind of the dynamic of the stories, and it's a lot of fun to write.
Oh yeah, that would definitely be a lot of fun because I doubt she cares that he doesn't want to go in.
No, she does not. It's like, follow me, Anderson, and off they go.
Yeah, it's like the voice of reason that she refuses to acknowledge. Poor
Well,
guy.
she does acknowledge it a couple of times. I mean, I did have to have her acknowledge it a little bit. Otherwise, she'd be a bit of a caricature. So,
Yes. Hmm. All right. So when it comes to fantasy, I know fantasy and mystery have always been kind of interlinked because I think most really good fantasy, especially dark fantasies, always have a mystery that needs to be solved of some kind. So do you do like when you do a fantasy, do you do just one mysteries, few mysteries?
well, yeah, it always depends on the story. It's like with the Saga of the Outer Islands book. That was kind of less of a mystery and more of a situation where it was sister against brother and the conflict there. But the second book is far more of a quest fantasy. So you've got the mysteries of finding these objects they need to defeat the big bad and sort of that. So that had little mysteries and they had riddles and places and things to figure out and decipher. So you've got that sort of a mystery going on. And the third book, you had kind of the mystery of what the heck is really going on because basically Rafe has been lied to his entire life. So you've
Ooh.
got that sort of exploding out in the last book as well. So, and you've got the mystery, and running through the entire series is the mystery of who exactly is the Nightmare Crow. So,
Ooh. Yeah, she sounds like she's a lot of fun.
yeah,
Oh,
the
he.
Nightmare Crow is a he.
Oh, I thought you said Nightmare Girl. I
No,
misheard you.
Nightmare Crow. He's literally a
Oh.
crow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds funner. So that leads to like a lot of dark speculatives like to toy around with betrayals a lot. Do you like to do that as well, or
Yeah, pretty much. Betrayals are a staple. Like with the Camelot Immortals books, I mean, the main character actually kind of does a betrayal in the book as well. It's sort of a consensual betrayal, but it is still a bit of a betrayal. And in later books, another character is found out to have done a betrayal. So there's a lot of betraying in the Arthurian legends
oh
books
yeah,
that I'm writing.
especially if you have
And
any.
yeah, and a lot of my short stories, a lot of them, their themes are betrayal and revenge. So you get a lot of that. Like like the Fairy Tales and Nightmares book, the Snow White retelling I did, there's a betrayal in that, which doesn't end well for the betrayer at all.
Mhm.
And I think there's a couple of yeah, I mean, there's sort of a betrayal with the Bluebeard retelling as well, because there's a lot of lies and the husband betrays the wives and the wife betrays the husband and so there's a lot of lying going on in that particular story.
Mhm. Hmm. That sounds like a very fun, complicated system of who's trusting who and why, and then why
Oh,
are we trained?
yeah, the trust is not a big commodity in my books at all. It's like, yeah, yeah, don't trust people in my books. It's even the good guys sometimes, like I said, the main character in past legends, she does betray someone in a way, and so I mean, it's for the greater good, but it is in a lot of ways a betrayal, and she has to deal with that particular act in book two. So that's a big part of book two as well.
That's what like dark speculative fiction does really well is it examines a lot of the lesser of two evils, and then what are the consequences of that. So, like, if you're betraying somebody and you're doing it for the right cause, how much of a betrayal still is it? And then what are the consequences of that?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what she's dealing with, like in book two. That one's not published yet, but it is coming soon. Um, she's dealing with, she feels like she betrayed the person, and maybe she kind of didn't, because I mean, like, it is for the greater good, and it was maybe the only solution to the issue at hand, at least the best solution to the issue. So she's kind of justifying it that way, but she really still doesn't feel good about doing it. And to make matters worse, her friends kind of are giving her the cold shoulder because they're having trouble dealing with the fact she did it as well. So that's compounding her guilt. And so, yeah, she basically takes off on a road trip with Excalibur. So instead of dealing with her emotions, she just takes off on an interdimensional road trip with Excalibur.
Yeah, who wouldn't take that option if we got it, really?
Yeah.
Mhm. So, what what would be your best or your favorite death in one of your books?
Oh, that's a hard
Without
one.
spoilers. I should throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a hard one because I've killed a lot of characters. I mean, a lot of characters. Um, I mean, oh, I don't know if, yeah, I mean, like, I'm trying to think. I think like the priest's death in the Little Red Riding Hood series, retelling in Fairy Tales Nightmare. That I had took a lot of satisfaction in that one. Um, and I did like Black Axe Morgan's death, or sort of death, because he only sort of dies again. Like he sort of dies the first time and comes back, and then he sort of dies the second time.
Well, zombies are
He's not coming
traditionally
back this time, but he still sort of dies. Um, but that one was fun because of the way what his ultimate punishment was on that particular one. So I guess those kind of stand out for me as far as deaths go in the books.
Okay. So do you like the more gruesome deaths or the quicker deaths?
Well, I kind of like the more gruesome deaths, to be honest. They're honestly more fun to write. I mean, I know some of the readers might not like them, but they're a lot more fun to write because I mean, they just are.
Mhm. What's your favorite part about writing them? Like,
Oh, I think like it's kind of cathartic to write a death scene. And it's really very easy for me to write a death scene. So I often write death scenes when I get stuck on other things because you know when I'm writing I often get stuck on transitional scenes. I mean they're necessary, right? But they're kind of hard
mhm,
to write because I mean you write an action scene, you get caught up in it and it goes boom 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 and then it's done. And then you've got to go from the action scene to them going home or to them talking to the party or whatever was involved or whatever comes next. I mean, sometimes you can end the chapter there and it's like and then it's a little easier to go into the next chapter because they're you can just say, well, they already are home and now they're dealing with
mhm.
what happened, right? But a lot of those transition scenes are a little difficult to write for me. So if I get stuck on it or I'm just not going from A to B where I should be going, I'll just skip ahead and write a death scene. And that usually kind of frees up the mental capacities, and then I can go back and fill in what I need to fill in.
Okay. Was there any death scenes that were actually hard to write that you didn't really want to write them?
No,
Okay.
I, I know a lot of fantasy writers really struggle with death scenes. They find them very emotional. But honestly, I think I fall on the side of the horror writers with this because no horror writer I've interviewed, or at least the majority of horror writers I've talked to, have had trouble killing off characters. We like it. We love it. We have fun with it.
Okay, then any characters you kind of regretted killing off?
I can't say I've ever regretted. I did hesitate. Now, this book isn't out yet, and I haven't actually written the scene. But I wrote book. I'm writing book one of a steampunk vampire novel, a series, and the character that's going to get killed off was introduced in book one, and I kind of liked him when I wrote him in book one. So I kind of regret having his death scene, but his death scene is integral to book two, so he's still going to die. But I may regret that one.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to keep him on as a ghost as well. So,
Okay, yeah, he's not getting out that easy.
yeah.
And so I kind of like to joke around with why I don't kill characters. I'm like, I'm not that nice to let him go. Mm. So, other than killing characters, how do you make your fiction dark?
Well, there's always, you've got setting, you've got mood, you've got atmosphere, and all those things. I mean, it's like when you're writing a horror book
Hmm.
and you like if you're writing something like the fairy tale retellings I'm doing, the easy way to do that, stick it in the woods, right? Dark, creepy, things in the shadows, that sort of atmosphere. That's an automatic dark. If you're writing a haunted house horror novel, automatic creepy dark atmosphere. It's a lot of times when you're writing something dark, it is in fact the setting. Now, if your setting isn't dark, then you kind of do the juxtaposition thing and you flip 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 the narrative. So you have the sweet, nice setting, but then you sort of make it a little off, a little creepy, a little what is going on here? This isn't supposed to be what I'm seeing, right? So like you did, like I did that with the Regency serial killers. It's like, yes, they're nice and they're having tea, but Millicent's inner dialogue is going, yes, this woman isn't very nice. I don't like her. It's like it's all polite society on the outside, but her inner dialogue is being very mean and catty.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the introduction there is like something's kind of off, right? And then as it slowly goes around, you get Jane is introduced and you're going, why is Jane there? What is Jane? What's she doing there? What kind of position does she have in the house, right? Because her position is kind of off in the household of the society. And then as the story goes on, you find out why Jane is there and what Jane and Millicent's relationship actually is. So it's like that. And it's like one of my favorite shorter pieces I did was called Alice in the Basement. And it starts off with a little girl locked in the basement. And most of the story is just her thoughts, her inner dialogue, and her story unfolds from her voice as it goes along. And as you start out, it's a little girl locked in the basement. And of course, your mind automatically goes to bad things are going to happen to the little girl in the basement, right? Because good people don't lock children in the basement. But as her story unfolds and you hear her thoughts and you hear why she was locked in the basement, the whole situation is flipped. And you realize that this little girl needs to be locked in the basement. In
Uh,
fact, she needs to be locked in a prison. But
oh yeah, I love playing with that. I like to take what people feel is safe and twist it. So I did that in like my story. In my one of my stories, I had the demon was actually a little cute little girl who, shouldn't be doing all the horrible, horrible things that she's doing.
yeah, children's are fun when you flip them and make them dark. Because like I did the child demon thing too in one of my stories as well.
They're just fun because even if you set it up that way, it's still hard when you're for a reader to read that the child is the one doing all these things. Mhm. Uh, so when you first started writing, what was the one story that you really wanted to tell, and were you able to tell it, or is that still in the back burner?
Well, the one story that I really wanted to tell was something set in Renaissance Venice, which I'm currently writing. So that took a while to actually find the right premise for that particular, because I've always been fascinated by Renaissance Venice because I mean, when most people think about Venice, you think gondolas, the city of love, tourist attraction, Venice, right?
Hmm.
But if you read the history of Venice, and I at that point I had only read like the surface history of Venice, and that's bad enough because it's very political, it's very dark. You've had assassinations, you had betrayals, you had all sorts of things. I mean, the whole history of the city-states of Italy is very betrayal. Like I can't remember the Borgias from and people like that. So I always wanted to write about the darker history of Venice. And so I finally got a chance to do that when I got the idea for this series with the Obsidian Blade and the immortal assassin character. And when I actually started diving into the history of Venice, it's a lot richer and it's a lot more intricate than I thought. So it's really a fun place to play in.
Okay. So do you start usually with setting then?
Depends on the story, because some things come from setting, like a lot of my Victorian steampunk stuff comes from the setting because it's usually set in Victorian London, steampunked. Because with steampunk, setting is a big part of steampunk stories, right?
Hmm.
But a lot of stories, especially the short stories, come from the characters. And some of them just come from ideas like the Chronicles of the Undead. What if your neighbors were vampires? So that's where that came from. So it depends on really what the story is and where the ideas come from.
Okay. I do have one more final question. For anybody who wants to write dark speculative fiction, what one piece of advice would you give them?
Don't be afraid to go dark. Push yourself beyond what you think is acceptable because you can always edit it down and you can you're never going to go wrong with going all out with writing dark stuff because like you can edit it down. It's a lot harder to add it in than it is to edit it out. I've found anyway. Because like with the a horror novella I'm working on, I did one scene. I went all out with the scene, but when I was done with the scene, I knew, yeah, I'm gonna have to pull it back because it's just went a little too far for my taste. So don't be afraid to go there because you can always pull it back in editing.
Well, that's a great piece of advice. And where can everybody find you?
Best place to find me is my website at afstewart.ca.
Okay. And where can they find your books?
Oh, they're wide, so you can find them on Amazon and Kobo, Barnes and Noble, um, Smashwords. I'll be participating in the Smashwords Rita ebook week as well, so some of them will be on sale from March 2nd till the 8th. So I don't know if this is airing before that, but
Oh, I'm hoping to have it up soon. Yes.
so you may get the sale or you may miss it depending on when this airs. But anyway, the yeah, so but you can basically find me anywhere. And I do have a direct store. You can find my books, buy my books direct either on Story Origin or through Lemon Squeezy.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Got my note. If you enjoyed this, I don't know if I should call it episode or discussion. We'll just call it discussion. Like, comment, and subscribe. And then until next time, have some fun and be creative.
Mm. Yeah, well, thanks for having